Guys, I've debated about making this video, and part of me doesn't really want to make it because it could open a can of worms. But honestly, I think it's time for this to be shared. I've wanted to make a video addressing this issue for quite some time, but I've kind of tippy-toed, thought about maybe I shouldn't. How do I tippy-toe around the issue? And I really think this needs to be brought out in the open. Because, a lot of people are talking about it. This debate, this awkwardness is happening all the time. I've been in beekeeping now for 18 years. I saw it from day one of me becoming a beekeeper. Now, please don't hate me in the comments. Let me explain, because I really think you need to hear me out on this, because it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. But listen, don't hate me in the comments, because I'm not the elephant in the room. I just want to talk about it and maybe bring an initiation of more healing and more understanding. Well, just as my thumbnail suggests, this has to do with the great divide between commercial beekeepers and the hobbyist. And I have a lot of information. I have a lot of details that I want to share with you today about this divide between the hobbyist beekeeper and the commercial beekeeper. Now, I really hope you'll stay with me all the way through, because, folks, my channel is really geared toward the hobbyists, those that have maybe less than 100 hives. So even though there's the hobbyist and the commercial beekeeper, we really break down the beekeepers into three categories. We have the hobbyist, who usually have somewhere between, who knows where these numbers fall, but maybe somewhere between 1 and maybe 50. And that's just kind of an estimation, or the way I feel. And then somewhere between maybe 50 upwards of 100, you might consider yourself a sideliner. Now that can be different on both ends. You could have 25 and be a sideliner. You could have 400 and be a sideliner. But generally, by the time you get in several hundred colonies, you're considered a commercial beekeeper. So just know that. But I want to talk today because my channel really is geared toward hobbyists and a little bit of sideliners, but certainly I'm trying to help new people who are getting started in beekeeping kind of start to understand it and start to grow their first 5 years. That's really what I love to do. And I see hobbyists sort of being, I don't want to say mistreated, but sometimes there's an awkwardness toward hobbyists from either sideliners or commercial beekeepers. And I'll explain this more as we get more into it, because I really think this needs to be explained, and I think we need to understand, because I can see it the other way as well. Sometimes I hear hobbyists talking poorly about commercial beekeeping. Hobbyists may look at commercial beekeeping and they might say, "Oh my gosh, they're poor bees. They're being piled up on semi-trucks. They're being hauled all across the country in not the best scenarios. And here I am as a hobbyist with 1 or 2 hives, and I'm loving my bees. I'm taking care of them. I'm not caging them. I'm not mistreating them." So sometimes there's a negative connotation from hobbyists toward commercial beekeeping. Not always, but I've heard it. I've been in this 18 years, going on 20 probably, and I've heard it. But I've heard it the other way, where commercial beekeepers think that hobbyists are just, stepping stones to become a commercial beekeeper, that hobbyists aren't really that important in the beekeeping industry, because sometimes commercial beekeepers may feel that we're the ones who are really keeping bees alive, and we're the ones who are producing all the honey, and we're the ones who are doing the major pollination. And both of those points of view are certainly understandable. But what I am hoping that we can see is a bridging between the hobbyist, the sideliner, and the commercial beekeeper. And let me explain it a little bit further. And I've kind of ran some numbers in my head on this. What is the difference between the number of hobbyists versus the number of commercial beekeepers, let's say in the US? Okay, so let me go to the overhead camera, because I want to draw this out for you. Again, these numbers are just things that I have noticed by observation. These may not be accurate, but I think it represents a good picture for what I'm trying to explain today. So this center circle represents the majority of beekeepers. And I would say upwards of 80% of beekeepers make up the totality of beekeepers in the US, and they are the hobbyist. So 80% of beekeepers are hobbyists, and they're the ones with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 hives, maybe, upwards of 20 or 30 hives. So hobbyists are a unique group of beekeepers because the hobbyists only probably spend about 10% of their time working their bees or interested in bees. They like bees. They're new beginners. They haven't kept bees very long, but they don't spend a lot of time doing it. They enjoy doing it after they have a full-time job or something. They enjoy going home, working their hives. They may not have a lot of science behind what they're doing. They may just have watched my YouTube video, right, and decided to keep bees. And they're not really into it enough really to spend a lot of money on equipment. They may not even buy an extractor yet. They just want to see what happens, right? So they basically have bought a kit. They've spent $300, $400 with a few other things that they need. Now, there's the sideliner that makes up an additional amount of people over here. And I'm going to guess again that the sideliners make up about 10% of people. So in other words, don't confuse the two 10%. Let me explain that differently. So 10% of their time. And so the sideliner, this is 10% of the total number. So 80% are hobbyists and 10% are sideliners. And again, sideliners can be, 50 to 100 hives, something like that. But then when you get into maybe hundreds of hives to thousands of hives, then you get into what we know as the commercial beekeepers. And let's say in reality, the commercial beekeepers are few and far between. Colonies, the different hives across America, the colonies of bees are largely in the hands of the makeup from commercial beekeepers, if you know what I mean. Most colonies, because commercial beekeepers keep so many colonies, the number of hives might be largely found in these big beekeeping commercial operations, and not so much in sideline, not so much in hobbyists. Don't know the facts for sure, just kind of guessing based on what I hear and kind of feel, So let's get back to the sideliner then. The sideliner makes up about 10% of beekeepers. And, I'll put beaks because I'm running out of room. But how much time does a sideliner spend? It's hard to tell, but let's say a sideliner might spend 50% of their time managing 100 hives or something. They may have to work a little bit more longer than a hobbyist with 1 or 2 hives. But regarding the 10% of commercial beekeepers, I'm going to guess that they spend about 90% of their time working their bees. That's a full-time job, more than a full-time job, because they're pollinating, they're moving bees around, they're keeping, fighting off pests and diseases and controlling mites, and their livelihood depends on the survival of their hives. They can't afford to lose 50% of their hives where a hobbyist can. The commercial beekeeper has so much more invested in it. Now, if I can make this comparison, let's take the comparison of simple things like being a cook. Many of you cook for your families, and so you're a cook. You cook meals at home, a meal or 2 a day, 3 meals a day, I don't know. And I would say largely among the population, about 80% of people make up home cooks that cook in their homes, right? And if you go a little further out where we represent the sideliner of beekeeping, there are those who are chefs that enjoy cooking more than just cooking because they have to make a meal for the family. And so you have the cooks or the chefs that may work at a local restaurant a little bit. They may enjoy cooking. They may enjoy baking. The sideliner cooks are the cooks who buy the special equipment. Like the sideliner beekeepers buy the nice extractors. They buy the thousands of dollars, $2,000, $3,000 extractor. They buy the equipment to make the sideline easier because they have maybe 50 to 100 colonies, so they need more equipment. And the sideliner beekeeper has more science. They get into the science more. They study reports. They study how they can keep their bees alive more because they have a lot invested, in the thousands of dollars of equipment, thousands of dollars of the bees. And the sideliners are usually making packages, or certainly they're making nucleuses, maybe selling queens. So they're making money and they don't want to lose that income, even though it may only make up 50% of their total income. They don't want to lose it. And so the sideline cook is the same way. They're doing more than just cooking for the family. They're cooking for enjoyment, or they're cooking for maybe a local restaurant or something, but they're putting a little more time into it. They spend 50% of their time a sideliner cook. These are the people that buy a real expensive oven. It's got a lot more burners on it. Maybe they buy the expensive cookware to cook with. They buy all of the things that make their hobby, their extended or expanded hobby of cooking more easier to accomplish. But then you jump all the way up to, let's say, a Michelin chef. Michelin chefs are the chefs that are rated by the Michelin reviewers that go and sample their food, and they produce a book every year. And you can be a 1-star, 2-star, multiple star Michelin chef. And I would love to go to a Michelin chef restaurant and eat one of those meals. It's not only just the taste, but I've watched a lot of Michelin shows, and it's amazing how beautiful that they make the meal on a plate. It's art. It's tasty, I'm sure, and it's beautiful, but it's also judged by how beautiful it looks. And so there's some Michelin chefs restaurants in Chicago, which is only 2-3 hours north of me. And so I got excited one time. I thought maybe I'll take Sherry to one of these Michelin restaurants. We can go up there and sit down and have one of these Michelin meals in one of these restaurants. Oh my gosh, it would break my bank. I think the cheapest that I could get into one on the outside perimeter, was about $600 or $800 for a supper meal. To really get into where you want to enjoy it and sit in with more of the place where it all happens, I guess, it may be $1,000. And I was just like, oh, I can't do that. Anyway, so that kind of happens with our little graph or the little drawing here. You have your cooks who cooks meals at home. You have your hobbyist beekeeper who has 1 or 2 hives. And then you have your sideliner beekeepers that have up to 50 hives. Maybe they buy a little bit more equipment, just like the cook buys a little more things for home to cook easier. But then you have your Michelin chefs, the chefs out here in Michelin territory. And these Michelin chefs have spent their whole life really studying all about cooking and everything, and they are the premier chefs in the kitchen. And they not only have all the equipment that makes cooking beautiful and wonderful, they have teams that cook for them. They have one guy cooking the broccoli, one lady cooking the mashed potatoes, and they have a team of people washing dishes and washing forks and plates, and just a team of people making all this happen. Well, so does the commercial beekeeper. The commercial beekeeper spending 90% of their time, working hard on all of their hundreds and thousands of colonies. They have a team of people helping them. Watch anyone, and you'll see that for the most part, either their family or they may actually hire a large staff of people to help them. And so I'm going to let David hide behind here, bobblehead David, a little bit longer because we haven't got into the ugly stuff yet, the division. So I'm just trying to explain the territory of how this is in beekeeping. This is the way it is. And you could compare it another way to agriculture. And just really very quickly, you could have someone in the center here that makes up gardeners, like people that enjoy planting tomatoes and corn every year, just in a family garden. And, they don't go out of their way to buy special. They may not even buy a tiller. They may do it all with a hoe, and they may plant a small garden and enjoy fresh food out of their garden. They're the kind of the hobbyist gardeners. But then you have your sideliner gardeners who start with maybe a tiller, maybe a small farm tractor, and they're producing enough to take to farmers market and make a little sideliner money on it. But then you get into way out here, the 10% of the big farmers, like around my house, where they farm thousands upon thousands of single crop like corn and beans. And yet it's interesting because in farming, and I apologize if my stats are wrong, but the concept is correct, that the small number of large farmers produce the majority of food that feed the world. I mean, that's just a known fact. So I don't know what that is, but I'm going to say 10% of the farmers feed, 90% of the world, something like that. But it's the same concept here. And so I would think that a large farmer who runs, and I don't know farming that well, but let's say they have a 30 to 60 row planter and harvester, combine or whatever. You see them take just a swipe out of a path of corn when they're harvesting it. And they just have to because of the thousands of acres, right? But what does that farmer feel like toward the person who has 6 rows of 10-foot rows of corn in their backyard and 5 tomato plants? Well, they don't really probably spend too much time thinking about that because they're concentrating on what they do. And so sometimes the small gardener can feel bad towards the large industrialized, if you want to use that term, farmer, because, they're the ones using what some people say chemicals that are very dangerous for our environment. These, monocrops are hurting our environment. And so there you have these small patches of family gardens that may get some drift from a large herbicide being sprayed on a field. And so there's airplanes flying crop dusters over near your family little garden. And so some people are like, ooh, I don't want those pesticides on the natural organic food that I'm trying to grow. So there's tension that's involved in this. There's tension in cooks, believe it or not. In fact, Michelin chefs are under a lot of pressure. Several of the Michelin chefs in recent years have committed suicide. So it's, and some of them are really hard on their staff. Some of them have been known for really yelling and demanding way too much from the staff that works for them. Now, in commercial beekeepers, I have this idea that all commercial beekeepers are nice. I know many of them. They seem to be nice. I don't really observe them yelling at people and all. But I would say commercial beekeepers are under a lot of pressure. Trying to get bees moved around. Commercial beekeepers I've always thought of as the modern day cowboys. They're herding their animals, which are bees. Bees are in the animal kingdom. They're herding them back and forth across different places of pollination. And it's interesting if you kind of follow the lifestyle of a commercial beekeeper, and it's not the same as a hobbyist. Now, I want to talk about something that makes Bobblehead David want to hide behind a beehive. Now, some people say there's no difference between a hobbyist, a sideliner, and a commercial beekeeper other than maybe the number of hives they have. I don't think that's true at all. I think there's a big difference. I think there's a huge difference. It has to do a lot with philosophy. For example, a hobbyist could actually not use any chemicals and say, I want to be a natural beekeeper. I don't want to use chemicals in my hives. And if they die from mites, that's the way it is, but I'm not putting chemicals in there. A commercial beekeeper can't say that. They can't take that position because their hives would die. And so they have to find ways to keep their animals, their bees, alive. So the philosophy of approach to medication or treatment of their colonies is, I think, somewhat different. It's a different approach to it. The hobbyists have very little that they're going to crash and burn financially compared to a commercial beekeeper. But even more than that, we're going to see a difference in how they view their bees, how much they worry about their bees, they worry about their operation, how they finance their operations. It's different. It's more than just having more hives. But the part that I want to talk about is sometimes the tension, the elephant in the room is the tension that develops sometimes between hobbyists and commercials. I'll kind of put sideliners aside because they're in the middle, bridging the gap a little bit. But let's just talk about this awkwardness that does exist between commercial beekeepers and the hobbyist. Recently, ABF, the American Bee Federation, had their meeting in January. And it went on at the same time, I think, that Hive Life went on. And Hive Life to me is more toward hobbyists or sideliners. It seems to be drawing, anyway, very new people. Many people came to my booth where I was, booth 509, and said, I'm starting in the spring. You're not going to hear that at ABF. No, I don't think ABF is made for those people that are going to go there because they're interested in keeping bees. I've never been, so I can't say for sure. I have been talking with them, and we've got some things in the plan with my channel here. But what I want to say is that I've been told that ABF is for the big boys. It's for commercial beekeepers. And that may or may not be the case, because when I've looked at their website, they seem to be very open to beekeepers of all number of hives. I don't think they're going to exclude you if you don't have 2,000 colonies, but it has seemed to be going in the direction of dealing with more, helping or assisting more with the larger beekeepers that have more colonies. I want to drill down into a part of what I've observed. I'm not talking about hive life. I'm not talking about ABF. But what I want to talk about is an ongoing divide that does exist between hobbyists and commercial beekeepers, even though it may not be something that either group are deliberately doing. It is something that is done. For example, let me show you this. Now, what I'm saying to you today are going to have exceptions. So I'm not preaching to the exception that once in a while things can happen like that. I'm talking about things that are more common. And that is that some people use the number of hives you have to determine your value or contribution or your knowledge in the beekeeping community. Now, that's where I want to come in and say, I think that needs to change. I'm laughing because I have pages and pages of notes that I've written out, scripted out, and I'm just flying, off of memory, which is kind of cool. But what I want to talk about is, how do we deal with this idea that if you only have one hive or two hive, or if you're a new beginner, that you're just a stepping stone to finally one day becoming an important beekeeper? Because look, sometimes beekeepers start out and they may only want to keep one or two hives. They don't really want 50 hives. They're really happy keeping 6 hives or 10 hives. And yet some people, those people that have 10 hives, they aren't looked upon as some of the sideliners or commercial beekeepers. And I know this because if you look at conferences, most conferences bring in speakers that have the notable large operations and more than just hives in their backyard. So in other words, and if you look at bee clubs too, most bee clubs are ran by sideliners or commercial beekeepers. Not always. And I know there's exceptions, but in my almost 20 years of experience in beekeeping, when I go to bee clubs, usually somebody, the president or the vice president, keeps, they have 300 hives, and so they know what they're talking about. They sell nucleuses, they sell packages, they sell queens, and so he's the president of our club, And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But why is it that a hobbyist that may have only 6, 10 hives doesn't have the same level of knowledge or looked upon as having the same level of knowledge or experience as somebody that has 300 colonies? Because let's face it, any of us with a bankroll right now could become a commercial beekeeper. Now, we may not be a good commercial beekeeper, but anybody right now could take money. I've bought out a commercial beekeeper once, and that made me a commercial beekeeper because I hauled all of his hives to my property. So instantly, because I wrote a check, I became a commercial beekeeper. You could do the same thing. You could go from 6 colonies right now and go to a commercial beekeeper and say, what does it take for me to take ownership of your 2,000 colonies and your employees? And now I'm the owner and I'm the commercial beekeeper. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily the number that always signifies the knowledge, the experience, the education, the personality, or the ability to lead organizations and groups and teach and etc. So I wanted to come in to this from this angle. And David Bobblehead, you can come out. It's not that bad. And if you've liked what I've said so far, give David a break, and little Bobblehead David a break, and subscribe. But what I'm trying to point out is that I think we should value the hobbyist, I think we should value the sideliner. I think we should value the commercial beekeeper. All three of them are doing what they want to do, what they love to do. Yes, some of them, I think there are some commercial beekeepers that are trying to, I've known many, let me put it this way. I've known many commercial beekeepers that have just about burned out of managing that many colonies. So they've been downsizing to a more comfortable number, especially as they get older and more well off, But I've also seen plenty of hobbyists and sideliners wanting to work their way up to be a commercial beekeeper. If you want to become a sideliner or a commercial beekeeper, only because that will make you look more knowledgeable and experienced, and you might be the president of the bee club and eventually the president of the state association and eventually the president of a large conference somewhere, maybe then that's the wrong reason. Because I really think you should do what you love to do, what you enjoy, what you have time for, what you have money for. I don't think we should ever pursue something to satisfy our ego to make us look better in the eyes of other people. I mean, let's face it, and especially you guys know this, that's in our DNA for guys to, want to shoot a bigger deer with more points on the antlers or whatever. Guys want to compete. We want to have that better job. We want to have whatever. I think, women can be that way as well, but I can only talk about men and what our, DNA kind of is wired to do. It's easy for men to equate their success at beekeeping based on how many hives they have. So let's come down to this. If you're a hobbyist and you don't look favorably upon commercial beekeepers, let me encourage you to be more open-minded, because most commercial beekeepers are really in love with what they do. They love it. They can't do anything but run a large commercial beekeeping operation. Their family loves it. It's their livelihood. And they're not trying to be like crazy with chemicals. They're not trying to destroy bees. Just the opposite. They're trying to keep bees alive. They want to keep bees alive the same way you do. Now, they can't always do they can't do it the way you do it all the time. If you're 1 or 2 hives in the backyard, you're experimenting with, different types of mite control management that hasn't really shown any scientific proof yet. You can do that in your backyard and test that out, because if you lose those 2 colonies, it's painful and it was expensive, but oh my gosh, you didn't lose $300,000 worth of hives by using some concoction that you were testing out on your hives. So you need to understand that the commercial beekeeper is having to do things a certain way because that is their livelihood. That's their job. And they are responsible to keep those bees alive because they have so many of them, right? And also commercial beekeepers are pollinating large groups of food, almonds and blueberries and apples and pumpkins and watermelon, and the list goes on, right? Without our commercial beekeepers pollinating all of these large groups of foods that are very good for us, these fruit and vegetables, right? And if they weren't doing that, let's face it, hobbyists, they don't have the hives or the equipment to go pollinate thousands of acres of apples. Okay? So if you're a hobbyist, learn to be open-minded and thankful for the commercial beekeepers, and learn to understand that they're not just being terrible with bees or terrible to the environment or terrible with chemicals. That's not true at all. Now, I want to talk to the commercial beekeepers. This is important. I'm probably not talking to many, but maybe the thumbnail got a few to listen thus far. That's why I put this all the way at the end, hoping they're not there. No, that's fine. I know a lot of commercial beekeepers, and they're great. I've helped them in their fields, and I know what they're up against. So what I'm going to say to commercial beekeepers is this: embrace the hobbyist as best you can. Don't look at them as a stepping stone. Don't start thinking, well, they're nobodies. I've got 2,000 more colonies than they do. What do they know? Don't look at it that way, because there are some research groups, researchers that only have 50 colonies in their research operation. And they're the ones coming up with the tests and the studies that will help a commercial beekeeping operation succeed at fighting mites or deadly diseases. You don't need 2,000 colonies usually to do research on bees. So just because you have a lot of colonies and some other smaller hobbyists or sideliners don't, try to add more value to the hobbyist and the sideliners. Don't look at hobbyists as sideliners, or don't look at hobbyists as stepping stones. Unless they become a commercial beekeeper, they're really a nobody. Don't view it that way. I'm not saying that you are, but if that's a temptation, try to avoid that. Because look, I think a lot of hobbyists have less than 10 colonies because they want to. They've done it for years. They know a lot. Some of them are master beekeepers. Some of them work for universities. Some of them are researchers, and they have less than 10 colonies at home because they don't have time to do it. They don't have time, but they know a lot about bees. In fact, I would say a lot of hobbyists that are in that kind of growth and expansion of research or just personal citizen science-ship, they may know more than a commercial beekeeper. I mean, just saying, it's possible. So if somebody chooses to remain small, let's don't degrade them and think that they're really a nobody. They should be asked to speak at your local bee club. They should be asked to speak at the state convention. They should be asked to speak at EAS. You know, why can't they be asked to speak at different conferences, even though they may only have 6 or 10 hives? That's their choosing. And they have some brilliant ideas, some brilliant things to share. And so I want us to consider how we can bridge the 3 segments of the beekeeping community together more, and stop trying to draw lines in the sand where we classify. It's like the Olympics, you know, or no, here's a better example. What if, let's say there's a family, a husband and wife decide to have one child, and they have one child. Another family has 12 children. They have more children. Now, is a family with 12 children wiser and better and should be asked to speak at conferences because they have 12 children and they have more? Why doesn't the parents with one child have as much experience as child rearing as the ones with 12? It's different experience, right? But the value is by choice. In other words, they decided just to have 1 or 2 children and the other family decided to have 12. It doesn't mean that one's better or worse than the other one. It's just a choice. And so my passion is to come alongside the hobbyists. Now, this is sticky. And David, you may want to hide again. Let's put him back behind here because it may get controversial now. This is a sticky part. Hey guys, I've got a lot more to share with you. I want to jump in here and just encourage you to subscribe. Bobblehead David really needs to get on the hive here and promote subscribing. You subscribing and clicking on the bell means so much to me. And listen, thumbs up. Remember right now, just the little thumbs up button, the like button, whatever. Click on it now. It'll help my video so much. Get to more beekeepers that want to watch it. Thank you. Because of the hobbyists and the sideliner and the commercial beekeepers, one of these groups, each of these groups may want the other groups to do the way they do it. And they may feel that if they don't do it the way I do it, they're wrong. I think we need to let people grow and come to their own conclusions about how they want to keep bees. Now, I'm not encouraging anybody to not treat for mites. I don't think that's the best plan. I don't think that's the best practice. I respect anyone who doesn't want to treat for mites, that wants to be, natural beekeeping. And my feeling on that, let me tell you how I feel about it. My feeling is I support beekeepers on my channel, and especially new beginners, hobbyists, up to sideliners. And if you have found a way to manage your mites naturally, I'm all for that. I think that's cool. I want to support you in that. I'm not going to make you feel like, oh my gosh, you got to douse them. Are you stupid? Douse them with a chemical. Come on. But I don't think the sideliners should make hobbyists feel like they have to do what sideliners do. I don't think commercial beekeepers need to make hobbyists feel like, hey, you're not running your bees like us. Well, then you're an idiot. We never want to talk down to people that are trying because, all of us, whether we're a hobbyist or a sideliner or a commercial beekeeper, we all kind of experimented, didn't we? We all tried different things. We all tried to go down a different path. For years, I tried to go. I was trying so hard not to have to treat for mites. Just, natural, try to do genetics and all that. How did that work out for me? Boy, not good. I lost way too many colonies. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sustain my beekeeping operation doing that. It was too much of a loss with that many hives. But I think if somebody wants to go down that road, I'm going to come alongside of you and support you on that. I'm not going to try to talk you out of what you feel that you want to discover on your own. Now, I don't think we need to be responsible. I don't think a beginner beekeeper should throw caution to the wind and create, mite bombs that are spreading mites to other nearby colonies by insane numbers. I mean, that's something that we need to be responsible for. To make a mite bomb and make it harder on fellow beekeepers around you to control their mites. And by the way, a mite bomb is a hive that has just a horrific infestation of viral destructor mite, and gone untreated, they just keep expanding. And then every time bees go out to forage or drones go out to mate and go to other colonies or on flowers, a bee lands on a flower, a mite can jump off and jump on another bee from another colony. They get just thrown out everywhere, these mites do. And that's why it's important for us to try to keep our mites under control. But if you want to do it, IPM, Integrated Pest Management, is a way that involves some very non-chemical ways of treating mites. A green drone comb, breaking the brood cycle of the queen, so that you break the brood cycle of the mites. You can use screen bottom board, powder sugar dustings. There's a lot of green drone comb trapping. I don't know if I said that, but there's a lot of integrated pest management that doesn't require the chemicals. But there's a time when these things may not work. And you think, I tried all of these, I can't keep them under control. And you have to use some type of treatment. And that's true with our own bodies, right? I mean, none of us really get excited about taking every bit of medicine we can have the doctor give us. I mean, we understand that we could eat better, we could exercise, and maybe give up some medication. And so that's the better route to take. But when you can't do that, you can't exercise or you can't eat right for whatever reason, you're on the road all the time or something, you got to take the medicine. But my point is, we need to understand that people need to be respected and valued for their decision, as long as they're not terribly irresponsible and making mite bombs. That's what I wanted to make my point. But I want to see us come to a place where we can appreciate where any beekeeper is at that moment when we talk to them. If they say, well, I'm starting in the spring, then don't treat them like, oh, well, I know more than you because I've got 1,000 colonies. If they say to us, I have 10 colonies and you have 30, there's no reason to brag about 30. If you have 500, it's no reason to think that they're a nobody because they only have 20. Let's respect all beekeepers. And that's one of the things that I think I'm seeing happening more. I keep hearing beekeepers say, especially beginners and hobbyists, that they go to bee clubs and they're talked down to. They're treated poorly. I think that's something that is maybe getting better, because there are a lot more. There's 80% of new beekeepers, so they're going to outnumber the people that are talking badly to them. But I think we're getting better at it. I think more people are coming along and understanding, if that's your method of swarm control, and it's not a traditional method, for example, it's not one of the things that I've ever thought about trying. But hey, if it's working for you, by gum, good for you. That's what I love about my channel here. I can support that. I don't have to give you 3 ways for swarm control, and if you don't do it my way, well, then you're not doing it right. See, I don't think that's healthy for anybody to come across that way. I think we need to come alongside people and give them the kind of the biology of bees. That's what I'm trying to do on my channel. If you help you understand the biology of bees, you can understand swarm control, and you might come up with a newer method that works great, and we're all astonished that, wow, we never thought about that. I mean, we're citizen scientists. All of us are discovering things all the time, whether we're a hobbyist, a sideliner, or a commercial beekeeper. So I'm really glad to see these 3 groups being bridged together better. I think it's awesome. I think it's wonderful that we see a larger community of beekeepers coming together and one supporting the other. One of the things that I enjoyed being in Hive Life about is I got to talk to a lot of vendors, and this right here is a Hive Alive, not Hive Live, but it's Hive Alive fondant patty. And this is a pollen patty that is known for its seaweed from Ireland. And so this is kind of cool stuff. The way you use that, by the way, we're going to give these away. That's what I'm talking about this. So if you place any order with us this week, I don't know how many of these we have. I think they gave us 12 maybe. So we don't have a lot, but I would say the first 12 people that place an order, even digital online courses, we will send one of these out to you. If you live in the 48 lower U.S. states, we'll ship one of these to you if you place an order, the first 12 orders after the publication of this video. And by the way, I wanted to show you the way you're supposed to put this in the hive. Like you can put it above your frames or above your inner cover, something like that. But the way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to cut this hole out. They say that if you take it completely out of this package and lay it on the hive, it may dry out. But by just cutting this hole and then putting it down on top of the frames like that, and then putting your top cover on, then that's how this is supposed to be applied. So take advantage of it. Place an order, first 12 after the video is published. We'll send one of these out to you for free. Now, if you're watching my video and you're a brand new beekeeper, or you're interested in it just a little bit because you're thinking, I like the idea of beekeeping now that I've heard him talk about a hobbyist and the different things of bees and all and commercial. I might want to consider this. I got a great video for you on how to start beekeeping. This video has 1.5 million views, and take a look at it. I want to walk you through some ways that you can start beekeeping in 2023.